Hey YouTube, what's happening? It's Richard, founder of Short-Term Rental University and professional real estate developer. And today's video are 9 reasons that short-term rentals are better than long-term rentals. So without further ado, let's get started right now. The first reason, and please don't underestimate this, is simply put, short-term rentals are a heck of a lot more fun. Right? Like, we're out there, we're making memories, we're creating these experiences. People come and celebrate birthdays and weddings and anniversaries and engagements and family reunions and corporate offsites. And like, we're actually out there creating these wonderful experiences, which is really like fun for the right group of people. Now, maybe you don't like it, and so maybe you shouldn't consider short-term rentals, but for those of us that have a hospitality element, a wedding planning element, an event planning element, or we like family reunions and helping people create memories, it's incredible. You can't get that in a long-term rental, right? Like, somebody signs a lease, they move in, and 12 months later they move out, there's nothing there. So if this sounds like fun, then this is definitely a good thing. And in that fun component, don't forget, as part of your due diligence and maintenance and so on, you're gonna also have to go suffer and do some repairs and work and maintenance at your beach house, at your ski house, at your lake house, at your mountain house, right? Like, isn't that terrible? So it's more fun doing that in a single family home that you've custom purpose built, connected to your why, versus just a generic building in the middle of nowhere that generates income. So number 1, it's more fun. Little asterisk, for the right person. Number 2, this is an emerging asset class and it's mispriced, which means we have greater net operating income than any other real estate asset class right now. And what specifically is mispriced? Vacancy is mispriced. Vacancy risk. When people go and purchase real estate with like net operating income and models and so on, they want to know consistently how much money's coming in the door. So a 12-month lease, I know I get $1,000 every single month on the first of the month, and I can model that. It helps me sleep at night. And in exchange for that certainty, I will take a lower monthly rate versus the uncertainty, the variability, the discomfort associated with, well, I don't know if it's going to rent 100% or 90 or 20% or 10. Like, I'm uncomfortable. Well, that discomfort has created a market where we are compensated too much for the vacancy risk, because the fact of the matter is there's more demand than there is vacancy, and the vacancy risk component of it is just a fear as opposed to reality. This will normalize as the market becomes more dynamic and larger and more institutional players come, and they will in fact come because the yield is so high. This vacancy risk will sort of get priced properly. It's a little bit like the Black-Scholes model for options. The advent of stock trading options, people didn't understand it. You could make a fortune because options weren't modeled properly. Then with Black-Scholes, they became properly modeled. Everyone was using the same models, and you saw compressed prices. So that will happen here, but for today, right now, 2021, vacancy risk is mispriced, and people like me, and hopefully you, benefit from that. 3, speaking of options, optionality is something that we all want in our portfolio. We want as many free options as possible. Options that don't cost us anything give us flexibility, that allow us to pivot, to change directions, to do all sorts of things. And in real world, in like the stock market and on Wall Street, where I used to spend an incredible amount of time, we would pay for that optionality. So if you can get options for free, that's mispriced. And we have 2 different components right now of mispriced options. The first mispriced option is optionality of calendar and rates. We can literally block any dates that we want for whatever reason. I'm doing repair work then, my aunt is coming to visit, I'm gonna be in residence, I don't want anybody there over the holidays, I don't want anybody there, during party periods, whether it's New Year's or whatever. We don't have any restrictions on our calendar. We can do anything we want as Airbnb hosts as it relates to both our calendar and our rates, and that's not true in most other real estate investments. So the short-term rental market allows us total flexibility. You can start hosting today and you can stop tomorrow. You could start tomorrow and go for a year or 10 years or 20 years, and the amount that you charge up or down is not regulated by anybody at all. That's very different than in most places where there's a dynamic market, and so like long-term rentals are going to trade very similar to the 100 units above or the 100 units below, or maybe the building across the street. In this space, what we're creating here, these experiences, really, however novel you are and however much value you add, you can price it and you can change your mind and you can do whatever you want with both rates and calendar, and that's a free option. That's an incredible benefit of the short-term rental market that does not exist in the long-term rental market. Similarly, the fourth benefit is that you can actually change your model altogether. In the short-term rental space, you could go to medium-term, and I've filmed videos on that. You can go to long-term if you wanted to. Let's say you wanted to take a back seat or spend less time and energy, or maybe just for a year, like people did this during COVID. I rented out short-term rentals before COVID, then the pandemic hit. I took a 6-month lease or a 12-month lease. Now that lease is over, I'm not renewing it, I'm going back to short-term rentals. That optionality is incredibly valuable. You can change your business plan without any prior approval, and the same is not true. You can't go from long-term rentals to short-term rentals because there's this pesky little thing called regulations, and you may not be zoned legally for short-term rentals. But once you're in the legal zone for short-term rentals, chances are you can do medium-term rentals or long-term rentals, and you can change, right? Like this year I did it this way, next year I'm doing it the other way. Whatever suits you, totally free option. It's entirely on you, and that optionality does not exist, and that's a free option, which means it's mispriced, and you want to take advantage of it. 5, again, mispriced. We get, as short-term rental operators, full tax benefits for depreciation, as if our place was rented 100% of the time. We get the full allowance of depreciation as if we had a tenant in residence 100% of the time. However, we go back to that first point I made about vacancy risk. We don't have 100% occupancy. There is in fact vacancy, and if you're doing this properly, I think vacancy is my friend. I want some vacancy. I don't want to be at 100% except for like peak summer months here in the Outer Banks or peak ski season in a ski area. But the rest of the time we have vacancy. And even though we have vacancy, we get 100% of the depreciation, which is a benefit. We have less wear and tear and 100% of the depreciation. And by having that vacancy, the way I teach people in my cohort-based class to do it, that means that we're optimizing for profit. Many new entrants into this space optimize for occupancy, which is a mistake. They're fearful of vacancy. When you're pricing properly and using dynamic pricing, you want to have some vacancy because that means you're optimizing your profit. And with this optimal profit, you also get 100% of the depreciation benefit with less wear and tear. Which brings me to my 6th point. There's less wear and tear. You don't have somebody living there 12 months of the year. You might have peak season, maybe you have 2 seasons, and I always recommend that all of your short-term rentals have at least 2 seasons. Don't pick a 1-season place, pick at least a 2-season place. But if you have 2 seasons, that means you also have 2 seasons of vacancy. Once again, you're pricing properly, you're making all of your money during the peak seasons, you've got some vacancy, you've got 100% depreciation write-off, and yet you have less wear and tear that does not exist in the long-term rental market. When somebody's a 12-month tenant, they're living there every single day of those 12 months. Maybe they go away on a vacation for a week or 2, but otherwise they're living there. This has less wear and tear on your property. And number 7, we are able to buy short-term rentals today, generating far greater returns than a comparable long-term rental. So said differently, we're buying higher cap rates that have yet to compress. In fact, we're not even buying cap rates. In the short-term rental market here in 2021, we're buying single-family homes based on comps. What did Mr. and Mrs. Jones pay across the street? And yet this is a business, it's got operating income, and it's not priced properly because we're buying on comps. But in the future, we're going to sell this business on cap rates. So using that language, we're buying big, wide, fat, high cap rates. We're going to ride the compression as more institutional buyers come in and they're willing to pay more and more and more for these businesses that we bought on comps. They're going to pay a lower cap rate and we're going to exit. So the fact of the matter is we're generating higher net operating income in these businesses than a comparable long-term rental. How much more? Today we're seeing anywhere between 2x the income to 3x the income. Now, one thing that a long-term player would say is, yeah, but you have to do more work. You have to have guest communications more frequently and cleaning and so on. We automate all of that, and I'm not going to lie, there is definitely more work, but it's mispriced, right? If I'm making 3 times, so it's like I have 3 units as opposed to 1, it only cost me 1 unit, but I have 3 times the income, that amount of work is mispriced. It will compress, as I shared, earlier. But we want to ride that now. We want to get in there now and enjoy those benefits. And then we want to exit at the lower compressed cap rate when institutions find out about it. The eighth benefit that short-term rentals have versus long-term rentals is that we have total dynamic pricing and it's floating. And what that means is I literally change my prices on all of my properties every single day. So as interest rates change, as costs of inflation change, as the underlying wages and labor for cleaners change, as it costs me more to go buy Windex and all the things that I need to run my business, I can literally change my prices every single day. I can adjust them up, I can adjust them down, I can test things and then change it. I can do whatever it is that I want. And in a long-term rental, it doesn't work that way. In many markets, in fact, it's regulated. You have a 12-month lease, you can't change your prices for those 12 months. And when that tenant wants to renew, in certain areas, there could be rent regulations that only allow you to increase your rent by, say, a certain percentage based on cost of living or whatever. We don't have any of those restrictions in the short-term rental market, and that's a huge benefit. Literally, having dynamic pricing that is solely dependent on supply and demand is incredibly profitable. So we could have a one-bedroom, say, in a ski area. During peak season, it could rent for $1,000 a night, and the rest of the year it's at $200 a night. Well, during that peak period, you're getting compensated for like 5 or 6 nights worth of rentals that you wouldn't otherwise get in a long-term rental place, right? You have a fixed rate for a month, you have to stick to it, you better pick the right rate, and in fact, you probably don't even set the rate because it's set by the market. There's 100 other units above you and below you and across the street and so on. Here, when we create this unique experience, we can change our prices every single day. It's floating rate, our costs go up and down, and in the world of finance, that floating rate component is incredibly valuable and it's not priced into short-term rentals yet. Eventually it will, but the fact that I can change my prices every single day dynamically and use tools that help me do it, and it happens all behind the scenes, that's unbelievably attractive, and that does not exist in the long-term rental space. And the ninth and final one, which I hope none of us ever have to experience, is that when you are renting on a short-term rental basis, you have far more favorable eviction laws. When somebody stays in your place for 30 days or longer, or is a long-term tenant, in most areas of the country, if not the world, they have certain rights. They have what's known as tenant rights, and if they stop paying and if they decide they don't want to move out, you have to go to court, you have to get a lawyer, you have to do all of these things because tenants are protected and they have rights. I've been through that. It's a pain in the butt. It's very emotional. It's time consuming. It's draining both financially and emotionally, and it just sucks. Nobody wins. In the short-term rental market, however, if somebody's staying there for less than 30 days in most geographies, they're not considered a tenant and they have no protective rights, and so you can actually have them evicted much faster, much sooner, just using the cops. You don't necessarily need to lawyer up. But again, I don't want to share any fear or spread any fear. I'm just saying that this happens to be a known quantifiable benefit of short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. And so if you stop and think about these 9 facts that I just gave you about why the short-term rental marketplace is superior to the long-term rental marketplace, it should come as no surprise. We're an earlier entrant, we're disrupting the way that people live, we're accommodating a new, say, remote worker, nomadic group, millennials like traveling like this. And so this is a new entrant, much like Uber was to, say, taxis, and we're doing a lot more, we're growing more quickly, we're getting compensated better, there's a lot of opportunity, and there's some real facts that I just shared with you, 9 of them, why this is a superior business and superior business model for the foreseeable future. But you have to do it right, and you have to do it properly, and if you want my helping hand, you'd like me to guide you and mentor you to do it correctly, please join the waiting list in the description below for my next cohort-based class, because we literally walk people through step-by-step on how to identify properties, how to create a portfolio that an institutional buyer would like to purchase. And if you need help and you want guidance, I'm your man. I would love nothing more. So do me a favor, please like the video, subscribe, and comment below what are some other benefits that you've seen running a short-term rental business versus a long-term rental business. And we see more and more people switching when leases aren't renewed in the long-term rental space. They switch to short-term rentals because the money's that much better. So I really want to hear from those of you that have these long-term rentals, maybe multifamily. How many units have you converted? What sort of upside have you seen? Are you seeing 2x, 3x, or even more? Please comment below. I'd really appreciate it. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the cohort-based class.